To some extent, every philosophical discussion is shaped by your approach to the philosophy of language. Many meanings arise in a given language through the contrast of words and meanings that are presupposed at the start of the discussion. So I'm going to draw attention to some of the presuppositions within the discourse on free will and determinism, with the following allegory. The concept of having choice, free will, making decisions for oneself, is illustrated by contrasting a puppeteer and a puppet. So there's a man holding a puppet with his hand, or a man holding the strings that hold up a puppet. And if the puppet is sophisticated enough, if the performance is elaborate enough, it may appear that the puppet is alive, that the puppet is thinking, that the puppet has emotional expressions and reactions and original thoughts and makes decisions. But you maybe have to explain to a small child, no. The puppet has no free will. The puppet doesn't decide anything. The puppet doesn't think anything. The puppet's actions are merely cause and effect in relation to this puppet master, the puppeteer. Explaining this to a child is implicitly relying on a contrast. This is not merely the abstract idea of cause and effect, that there is a contrast between the type of decision, the type of mentation, the type of thinking that the puppeteer engages in, and the type of action, the type of reaction in the movements of the puppet, right? So I think it is very beguiling for many people in my audience, apparently, many people who watch my videos, to imagine that just the abstract category of cause and effect solves this problem, and no further explanation, no further problem solving needs to be engaged in, to simply say, no. Both the actions of the puppet and the puppeteer, both the actions of the man and of the puppet that resembles a man, both of these things equally are subject to cause and effect. And I think this is assigning explanatory power to one mere abstract concept, cause and effect, which is like gravity. You say, oh, well, of course we don't have free will. There's gravity. This, to me, is actually quite spurious to the question. Whereas the contrast being made between a puppeteer and a puppet is actually something meaningful. So I feel like a lot of this discourse relies on obfuscating and evading very real and meaningful contrasts. So Muhammad here is a skeptic, I guess, about both free will and determinism. I don't think you easily accept either premise. I'll find out in a second. But I notice that when I talk to people about this concept, when I am assailing the assumptions of people who dogmatically believe in determinism, people who really believe there is no difference between the puppet and the puppeteer, neither ethically, nor cognitively, nor otherwise. That is all just the chain of cause and effect. When I ask them about dreaming, they have nothing to say. One of the differences between a puppet and a real person is dreaming. One of the differences between a person and a computer program, computer programs in many ways are like puppets. If the computer program is elaborate enough, if it's sophisticated enough, it can resemble a real person. It can seem like it's talking to us and making decisions and carrying out physical actions, computers and robots. One of the differences is that a computer does not have creative, original ideas about the future in the way that a human being does. And when I've talked to people who believe in determinism, even these types of very simple illustrations, that ultimately are illustrations of an implicit difference between the puppeteer and the puppet, they can't deal with. They actually just get angry and yell at me when I've talked about this with them. They become frustrated and just try to insist that no, a puppet really is the same as a person. A computer program really is the same as a human mind, despite very clear hard criteria that distinguish them, that distinguish the sphere of people making choices that they're accountable for, ultimately, legally and ethically, and objects moving, maybe mimicking real choices and decisions as part of this so-called chain of cause and effect.
Well, I guess the reason why I'm not very satisfied with this line of reasoning is because it relies on an instinctive sense and perception of the difference between us and robots or machines or artificial intelligence. I want something like a lot more vivid and philosophical,
Right.
and a lot more clearer than that. Like an argument that has a clear, like objective premise that doesn't rely just on our subjective perception
Okay.
of the distinction of our mode of being and
Right.
our
Okay, so,
consciousness in relation to.
I think that's a good objection to someone else, but not to my argument. So what I just said, I gave you two criteria already: dreaming and asserting ideas about the future. Right? Ideas created ex nihilo. Right?
We think.
So wait. Scientifically, it's not subjective. We can prove whether or not cats dream. We can prove whether or not dogs dream. We can prove whether or not sharks dream, right? Various types of animals and mammals. Okay, so scientifically, it's an objective fact whether or not something engages in dreaming, right? Now, I think you would also concede the point. Scientifically, we can determine that my computer, when I put it to sleep, it is not dreaming. There's nothing in the computer when it's off or asleep, right? Yeah. So I just say, I think your objection, it might be good for someone else's approach to this. But I've already given you two very hard criteria. So my really, what I would say with the future, I would phrase in terms of the radical imagination and having access to the form of the future. It's not even saying why I'm using this kind of word. But it's difficult to say. When we're talking about imagining the future, that I'm not talking about a reaction to cause and effect. Very often the selection of examples by determinists, they'll say, oh, well, you see a beautiful woman across the street, and then you react to this beautiful woman. Well, wait, I'm capable of sitting in an empty room and imagining a beautiful woman I've never met. And there are people who in their whole lives, they never met a black person, but they sit and imagine and fantasize about a romance with a black person. They choose to imagine things for the future. And then they buy an airplane ticket to Africa. Things happen. They act on this dream. Okay? So having the capacity for radical imagination in the form of the future, producing new plans, then following up those plans, these are criteria we can test, right? And I just want to say, not all animals will have this. I mean, presumably, some mammals have such limited cognitive abilities. I don't know if there are any mammals that do not dream, but I'm willing to accept that an oyster has no brain. I mean, some animals must be so simple that they don't dream and they don't think about the future and plan for the future. I would be willing to accept that. But my point is, with humans and with many other animals, whether they're monkeys or dolphins, these are hard criteria that establish the capacity not just for choice, but for innovation, for producing new options that are not presented to us. So passively, yes, I can. Okay, every day I walk to the university. We talked about this. Maybe you walk to the university every day and you never see a woman you find attractive, whether that's just physically or intellectually and their character, right? And yes, there's a level on which human beings are just reacting. My choices are A, B, and C. So you go to university, you study chemistry. In your chemistry class, there are only 3 attractive women. Are you going to try to talk to this one, this one, or this one? That's not reality for us because I'm not a puppet. I don't just passively react to cause and effect. I can sit there and think, maybe I've never met a black woman. Maybe I've lived my whole life in Guelph, Ontario, and I've never met a black woman. And I think to myself, wow, you know what? In my mind, the fantasy is that I go to Africa and I meet this tall, dark-skinned black woman and we have this romance. And I go and pursue that, even though I've never seen that person. I've never reacted to that stimulus, right? A puppet cannot do this. A computer cannot do this. And I'm not even choosing something as far-fetched as creating an original painting starting with a blank canvas, right? There are hard, empirically testable criteria here that are not subjective, that are not appealing to a spiritual or subjective sense of what it means to be alive or make choices. Yeah, I think this stuff's verifiable.
Well, the thing is, if you are an atheist or somebody who's not religious, who doesn't believe in a, let's say, transcendent reality or supernatural reality, beyond material reality, this still all amounts to perceived choice and perceived creative thinking and perceived choice. But at the end of the day, it's all just material. It's all just matter. Yeah, and matter at the end of the day is subject to the laws of physics. Yeah, the laws of physics and chemistry. And how would you what philosophical base would you base on the argument that this perceived choice and this perceived creative those perceived creative faculties of humans are real, are not just perceived.
Right.
Like how would you reconcile those two things that seem to contradict each other? Like if you're an atheist,
right.
or not sure.
In the way you've proposed it, there you can already see your argument is self-contradictory. So you started by establishing the criterion in terms of the order you happen to present it in. If it is not transcendental, then it cannot be a choice. So that's a completely religious concept that has nothing to do with my approach to this problem, right? So you started by saying only something that transcends matter can be a choice. That's not my perspective. My perspective is you can be dissatisfied with the women in your chemistry class and think you're going to take a vacation in Africa and try to find romance in Africa. I'm sorry. No, but wait. There's nothing transcendental. There is no reason. Who could possibly refute this response by saying, yes, but that only involves matter and not the transcendence of the material plane. That's not what we're discussing. That's what we're discussing. We're discussing the difference between a puppet and a hand that holds a puppet and a brain that controls the hand. That's all matter. But there's a difference there that really, really matters. That's really significant. And that so-called determinists want to explain away. So you closed by asking me the question, basically, how do you justify that the empirically obvious choice, the perceived choice, but it's empirically real, it's perceived, it's empirically real. How do you justify that it is real? Okay. This also implicitly admits the weakness of the other side. The other side, the determinists, the onus is on you because you are trying to disprove something that is empirically given, that is apparent, that is perceived. You have to prove it's unreal. Okay? So this isn't the situation that we're standing in the desert and somebody sees a mirage and they say to you, oh, if you see a mirage, you have to prove to me there's really water, that this isn't an illusion, this mirage in the desert, right? Okay, no, this is the opposite. The onus is on the other side. The difference between the puppet master and the puppet is empirically real. The difference between things that can generate out of their imagination original options and then make those choices, that can create new options, not just options they're presented with, not just the three women you see walking down the street or in your chemistry class, but can dream of a woman they've never met and then go to Africa. Okay, this is all in the world of the empirically real and things we experience and things we can verify. Dreaming is empirically real. It's verifiable, right? But you want to negate that. So how do you explain dreaming? How do you explain to me that all of these examples I've given, that they don't exist, that they are a mirage, and that in fact, I, in dreaming, and I, in coming up with original ideas for the future, I am in fact a puppet being controlled by something else? That's an enormous burden of proof. They never even try. They never even attempt to rise to. They just engage in a kind of satire of religious ideas, like the idea of a transcendental, supermaterial agency, that are completely irrelevant to the philosophical problem or its solution.
You still haven't answered my question.
Okay.
How does it make sense if everything is matter and the interactions, like if everything results from matter and its interactions, how can we reconcile your view with this philosophical underpinning of atheism and materialism? It's still like I can concede that
What is your definition of matter? That something is incapable of thought? That's a really stupid definition of matter, right? Who would define matter that way? The brain is made out of matter.
Yeah.
Dreaming involves matter.
Yeah.
So why again? You've just defined. So I think I did actually at the beginning.
Your thesis implies
your definition of matter
yeah.
is of something unthinking. Mine isn't. Human beings are made out of matter.
That's not necessarily my definition, but your argument implies that at some level of complex organization, matter just magically develops
why magically?
a property.
What's
that's
magical
called
about it?
free choice and consciousness.
No. But okay, wait. You characterize my position as magical with no basis. What's magical about dreaming? Why is it magical? What's magical about planning a vacation in Africa? There's nothing magical. There's there's no burden of proof on me to explain that this kind of thing happens. These are very mundane, completely non-magical, non-transcendental circumstances. On the contrary, it is magical. It is magical thinking if you tell me that the puppet master, the man holding the puppet, is himself a puppet with no evidence. Where are the strings? Who controls him? What is the cause and effect? Oh no, it's invisible. It's magical. You just have to use your imagination. You have to use your imagination that there's a God controlling the strings. Oh no, wait, we're atheist. It's a God with a lowercase g that we call cause and effect. That there is a magical, invisible, supernal agency choosing for him and determining these choices, even in his dreams, even when he thinks about the future. There's a burden of proof there. You could never reach. You know you could never reach it. You know you can never have a material cause and effect, puppet master explanation for human dreaming or human beings planning and coming up with original ideas and plans for things they do in the future. It's a burden of proof you can never meet. So your view, if I know to some extent it's not really his view. To some extent he's just engaging in debate. But the view of a determinist, of someone who believes in determinism, is in fact religion. It's monotheism minus God. The role of God has just been taken on by the universe and by this abstract category of cause and effect. But there's no evidence for it. There is no evidence to support that the man holding the puppet is himself a puppet being controlled by another hand. That was the role Christians and Muslims believed was God. And you've just replaced it with an abstract category of material, cause and effect, the universe, the laws of nature. Well, no, we have really serious, empirically verifiable counterclaims here that cannot be accounted for in that way. So from my perspective, the determinist position is magical. It's magical thinking.
This is strange because I'm aware of a lot of schools of thought in Islamic theology, for example.
Yes.
Where they defend they defend free will based on the acknowledgement that the laws of the universe, the material laws, are deterministic, but because God created them, God can also suspend them whenever He wishes, and He can shield us from the deterministic nature of those laws, and He can always interfere. So there's nothing deterministic. But if you're an atheist, and you only have those, you have matter, you have the interaction between matter, you have these laws of physics and chemistry. It's kind of hard to make sense of them on a theoretical basis, on a conceptual basis. How could even free will exist? Even if I acknowledge the empirical reality of them, how can I make sense of them? How it is even possible?
So I would compare
perplexing, really.
So there are two allegories here. One, I have met many people who used to believe in Christianity or Islam, but one of these big mainstream religions, and then when they lose faith in Christianity, they also lose faith in monogamy and sobriety. And they think, okay, now that I'm an atheist, I'm going to drink a lot of alcohol and have a lot of sex or cheat on my wife, have a lot of sex with random people. So this is a stereotype, but it exists. And that is because their belief in those virtues was tied to their belief in this God and this religious view of the world, right? Now, for me, I have always been an atheist. So my reasons for living by a particular ethical code never relied on that God, right? So for me, atheism doesn't have those effects. So I think what you're describing, I can sympathize with, that there are people whose belief in God was linked to a certain magical view of the universe, and then they assume that by removing the God, they must believe in determinism, and they don't consider the extent to which determinism is actually fallacious and is repeating and retrenching and reinforcing a monotheistic way of thinking about the universe. Secondly, if you are looking at a billiard table, so in American English, people say pool, billiards, there are balls on a table, and they are ruled by cause and effect, right? It is very easy to look at that table and say, okay, everything on this table is cause and effect, right? Like the connection between the balls. One ball hits the other, and the next one rolls. There's no choice. There's no original thinking. There's no creativity. There's no planning for the future. Nothing about this resembles a human being sitting at a blank canvas and thinking, what am I going to draw a picture of? What am I going to paint a painting of, right? And there's no dreaming. The balls don't dream. They don't have anxiety either. They don't have fear. They don't have hunger. There are a lot of differences between billiard balls and human being, all of them material, all of them empirically verifiable. However, the balls on the table can never invent the game of pool. They can never invent billiards. Ultimately, human beings sat down and thought, how can we make this game fun and enjoyable? There was some other game before they were inspired by and they adapted. How are we going to set up the table? And still today, like my daughter is only 5 years old. When we had a billiard table for her, we had to invent new games because she didn't have the patience or interest to pay. Okay, let's come up with some new rules. Let's come up with a new, let's try to make this fun, right? So all of us, to some extent, this is the homo ludens approach to human beings. The role of creativity in even creating a game and even setting this up, and then the role of the human mind in planning and choosing which shot you're going to take, this is not well explained by the abstract God of cause and effect. It's not. You're creating absurdities and problems. And what you're demanding to know is there something magical about human beings creating this game because it connects to choice, originality, radical imagination. By radical imagination, I mean imagination that departs from direct stimulus, where you're not just reacting to something you see. You're thinking about the future or fantasizing about having a better life in Africa when you've never been to Africa. Nobody suggested to you. Just think of this yourself. Whether it's fantasy and daydreaming or absolute dreaming, these are empirically real, verifiable aspects of life. And in many ways, they create the conditions for the game of billiards, for the very limited sphere of experience that's neatly described by cause and effect. So your view of the world presumes that the ocean is cause and effect, and then the island is, so to speak, the illusion of free will or choice, original thinking. Okay, and my view is the opposite. My view is that the ocean is consciousness, and within that we have a small island where we can observe empirical phenomena and completely explain them in terms of cause and effect, which is only in like laboratory conditions and a billiard table, in artificial conditions that we as human beings have created. This cause and effect deity is not all that useful to us in a world of hallucinations and dreams and wandering around the jungle trying to find something to eat and so on. This is not really so much of the human experience. There are people falling in love with each other and falling in love with each other. The kind of psychological, anthropological reality of what human life is like. But sure, we can sit down and look at a chessboard or a billiard table or these other very artificial things, and you want to imagine that's how the whole world works. But that is really a deification of the universe. That's a deification of the laws of physics, and saying the billiard ball table controls me as the puppeteer, and I'm just the puppet in the hands of the laws of cause and effect.
Well, why consider the subjective realm of existence as the ocean? Right? You can't jump off a rooftop and not expect gravity to pull you down and break your bones.
Right. But people can. People do. People kill themselves all the time that way, right?
Yeah, they still die.
Right.
Yeah, this
right.
Is what I mean.
Yes.
Like,
right.
Like,
No.
Okay,
Wait. No. But that's your example. Confirms why my perspective is the way it is. I could ask the question. I'm going to ask the same question, different wording. Why do some people jump off rooftops expecting that they can fly and then die? And that is because the subjective experience is the ocean. There's a famous example from American history, I'm sure it's part legend and part real, of children watching the Superman cartoons. I think it was actually the Superman radio show, and imagining they could fly like Superman if they jumped out the window. Yeah. And then they started this propaganda campaign where at the start of every Superman cartoon and movie and radio show, they'd have an announcement saying, look, remember kids, Superman can fly, but you can't. They had safety warnings about this. I don't even know if it happened or how many times it happened, but allegedly some children tried to fly. And that is because for them, that subjective experience is more real. And I would again say something like the experience of human beauty, all these things we perceive. Sure, the subjective experience blots out the objective experience. Sure. So for us, that's the ocean we swim in. Sure.
The key word is here for them.
Right, and that's what we're talking about.
Not reality. Like reality is not necessarily our perception.
Okay. So
this is the core.
So if the claim,
right,
but claims about reality. This comes from my first premise. Claims about reality rest on contrasts in language. So if you say the puppet is unreal, I didn't say that. I think the puppet is real. If you say the puppet is unreal because the puppet is a fake person, and the puppet master, the puppeteer, the man holding the puppet, he is real. He's a real person. That's a distinction of reality. Now, I know what you mean, but in a sense I disagree with you. Both are real, right? One is a real puppet and one is a real man. But from another perspective, one is a fake man, one is a real man. What is the contrast whereby you can claim, let alone prove, that the man, his choices and his cognition and his dreams are unreal, that there is a puppeteer, that there is another hand above it holding the puppet, controlling and determining what happens here? What evidence is there for that? Why would we imagine that?
That every other entity that is composed of dead matter behaves this way, behaves deterministically.
Do dogs?
No, I mean
Do monkeys?
Every dead composition of matter behaves deterministically.
Right, but that's a pretty clear difference, isn't it? Why
should we make an exception when it comes to...
What exception? No, you see, you're creating the exact opposite fallacy. Your fallacy is you are claiming, how dare you not treat human beings as billiard balls? But as if billiard balls are the rule, as you're saying dead matter is the rule that human beings should live up to. And I can say to you, no, human beings fall into the same category as dogs. And empirically, there's a lot of evidence for that. My whole view is empirically verifiable. Do dogs dream? They dream, right? Do billiard balls dream? No. Do computers dream? No. There are very simple, material, worldly, non-transcendental criteria that separate entities making decisions, entities engaging in creative imagination, thought about the future, creating new ideas for the future, creating options for the future that didn't exist before, and then choosing those options or choosing other options, making those contrasts in their minds. Billiard balls don't do that. Rocks don't do that. To some extent, dogs, monkeys, whales, dolphins, to some extent other animals do. There is nothing mysterious about this. The sense of mystery is only created by holding up completely spurious, transcendental contrasts. Why should a human being aspire to outdo a rock in mindlessness? It's a totally bizarre claim that has no... Again, but you kept dodging my question. What empirical evidence can there be for another puppeteer? Who is holding the strings? What is the cause and effect? If you keep saying, in the abstract sense, there's cause and effect. Okay, the relationship between the puppeteer and the puppet, there's cause and effect. There are strings. Where are my strings? Who controls my dreams? Who or what? What is the cause and effect that determines what I see when I dream?
The laws of physics.
Which
give rise to the laws of chemistry, which give rise to the laws.
Okay, so you would actually have to rise to the level of empirically trying to validate, trying to explain my dreams, explain my ideas for the future, explain the notion of taking a vacation in Africa. Someone's dissatisfied with the options in front of them and say, no, this man is a billiard ball. There's some cause for this effect, but you don't have that. Within the laws of physics, you have no cause for that. None. There's no cause for that effect. There is no string. So you're setting up criteria you can't live up to. Yeah.
I don't need to have a man who's holding the puppet, because
right.
I have the laws of physics are impersonal forces.
So is God. So is God, right? So is the Christian God. So is the Muslim God.
This is what I mean. I don't have to use a god or a personal mover for my argument. It is enough.
Yes, you do. No, that's where you're wrong. No, it's not sufficient to say, because if we have a ball on the billiard table that just suddenly moves of itself, where there's no cause, then we have to say, where did this effect come from? Right?
And why do we ask?
So we are talking, where do the dreams come from? Where do the ideas about the future come from? You can't just say, oh, well, there are causes. There's an unseen, magical, transcendental mover. There's a cause you can't see and can't imagine. Just have faith. Just have faith that the laws of physics and the universe, the God that we say isn't God, is explaining it. No, there's a burden of proof on you here. I mean, we both accept billiard balls move around the table. The puppet moves in the puppet master's strings because of cause and effect. And now you're saying you want to extend that to explain human imagination, creativity, and original choice making. So where is the cause? If you are claiming that's a cause and effect relationship, the burden of proof is on you to show a cause. Otherwise, you're engaging in magical, religious, dogmatic thinking. You're just asking me to have faith that even though it's invisible, it's not. It comes back to Karl Popper's philosophy of science. My explanation passes Karl Popper's test. Everything I'm proposing here is falsifiable. Everything. It's all empirically real. It's all perceptible. It's all falsifiable. And part of Karl Popper's test is it has to be true in some cases and not others. Your philosophy and all determinism, thoroughgoing determinism, is non-falsifiable, is non-empirical, is non-perceptible, and you claim it's true in all times, in all cases, whether or not it can be verified or tested. It sounds a lot like religion. By Karl Popper's definition of philosophy of science, determinism is a religion. Falsifiability matters, right?
Well, intuitively, I can't find fault with your argument, honestly.
Right. Well, but I do find fault with yours, because your argument absolutely stands or falls on the notion that we are dead matter, that human beings must be understood the same way as billiard balls, or the same way as rocks, or the puppet. And mine is, no, it's very obvious. And again, the sciences have proven this. A dog is different from a billiard ball. That's part of why we're vegan. It's not the whole reason, but I mean, we think cows are not the same as unliving inert objects, right? Cows have perception and fear and dreams and make choices. Very limited choices. Cows do not get the idea to take a vacation in Africa. They don't. I mean, many animals are limited to making choice between what they see or thinking about things they have seen in the past. Their ability to come up with radically new and original ideas is limited. I completely concede that animals are less intelligent than human, the other non-human animals. However, you already know there are a million scientific ways to define and test it and falsify it, that animals are different from rocks. I mean, what an ultimate unscientific point of view that your philosophy insists that there is no difference between living and unliving matter. Of course it is. There has never been scientific debate about whether rocks are living or unliving, and probably from memory now, I can do it. What are the criteria that separate living from unliving matter? Do you know the formal ones? Respiration, reproduction, response to stimuli. There's a list of about 6.
Evolvability.
Right. So I think the need to seek nourishment. There are a few. There's something like 6 official criteria, right? And we know rocks often resemble something that's alive in nature. If you see certain cave formations, stalagmites and stalactites, it looks like a blob. It looks like a jellyfish or something. It looks like something that might be alive. You can see rock formations that look like they're alive, but they're not, because they don't respirate. They don't breathe, among other things. That's right. They also don't mentate. They don't have cognition. There's a whole list of empirically verifiable properties matter. And I sympathize. I really do think your perspective and the perspective of the people who believe in determinism in my audience, because it's a belief. It is a belief in things unseen. I really do think you arrive at it through negating the Christian worldview or the Muslim worldview, and you don't realize the extent to which you're reproducing the defects of that worldview in a new atheist worldview that thankfully at least gives you an excuse to go out and get drunk and sleep around. All right, guys, we're past the half-hour mark. This is Mohammed, a.k.a. Mohammed Socrates. He supports me on Patreon. You should too. Link in the description. Hit me up.